the trouble with having conversations like this in the United States and debates in general is that we have a disproportionate number of deeply stupid people that influence public life. And one of those deeply stupid people is a guy, a YouTube pundit, a fellow YouTube pundit, by the name of Dave Rubin. Now, I've never really thought to say anything about Dave Rubin beyond making fun of him. I guess he used to be on the Young Turks. Sam Harris disciple, does a show where, you know, he interviews people like Milo and Ben Shapiro, and it's all, honestly, I haven't watched much of it. It's all very boring.
It's a good show. It always turns out that the offensive white guy was right all along.
Right. There's always this weird process by which somehow, you know, grotesque bottom feeders that make their living bitching about a woman Ghostbusters or saying that African American studies departments are ruining the planet, or, you know, I don't know, Anthony Cumia not having a serious show is like the greatest threat to freedom of speech and freedom of thought in the history of the planet.
And other ideas you want free exchange of. Yes,
and other ideas you want free exchange of. You know, I do think it's interesting if you ask these people, like, hey, you know, say they're on their, you know, rocking chairs, they sit back and watch the rising sea levels. And they say, like, hey, what did you do during the age of Trump and unprecedented assaults on the public and global terrorism and mass inausterity and a global climate crisis? Well, what I did was I did segments about how kids at Oberlin didn't like racists, but that they were the bad ones. That's what I was focused on during that time. So Dave Rubin, and you know, he has nothing worth, and it's all this, you know, classical liberalism, free exchange of ideas, blah, 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 jerk off stuff. And he just does this sort of basically, it's a conduit show. It's kind of a soft alt-right show, in my opinion, just kind of basically, you know, as they say, has on a lot of guests. And, you know, and then he does the thing where, and he clearly, you know, he has no idea what he's talking about. He'll say he supports single-payer health care, but then kind of roughly describes some other system. You know, he endorsed Gary Johnson. Sort of the perfect meeting point of genuinely dumb and breathtakingly cynical and deeply boring.
But how well Jesus treated the Muslims?
Yeah, Jesus treated Muslims well. He didn't have a problem with Muslims, and he was around plenty of them. That's another thing that you could look up that Dave Rubin said. And there's a big market for this stuff. And there's nothing terribly, like, starting with Sam Harris, who I would say, I mean, Sam Harris is in an entirely different intellectual league than Dave Rubin. I will acknowledge that. But there is, a market for this notion that there are these really challenging and hard ideas that actually somehow confirm all of your biases. These really controversial opinions that actually underpin the status quo. These really unsettling things that actually mean in a real college environment that you just won't be exposed to any type of challenge to your ideas and privileges. I'm not that far out of college, frankly, okay? And yes, I went to a liberal arts college. There were conservative students. There was everybody. They could say what they wanted. But you did see in some classes, maybe people were thinking about their position in the world in a way that they hadn't before. God forbid. So but there's a big market for this, and you know, it's easy and it's comfortable with the fake allure of being challenging. There would nothing more rewarding in a great market to constantly have your confirmation bias confirmed in a way that suggests that you're actually on the edge. It's a great marketing position. Mother Jones recently did a piece about how, you know, and I think this is, you know, actually a limited angle, because direct funding mechanisms by things like Patreon or Indiegogo can support everything. They can support things that are much better and more radical than what you might get in mainstream press. But the focus on this happened to be on how alt-right and far-right extremist figures are able to get direct funding from their fans and escape, you know, the Fox News syndrome, or other outlets where if they go too far, you can target their advertisers. And as part of this article, Josh Harkinson, Josh Harkinson referred to Dave Rubin, who does incredibly well on Patreon, as far right. I guess for the obvious reason that Dave Rubin basically has a far right show, where he at the very least, gives platforms to a lot of extremists. I think he also had Yanis Varoufakis on recently, so maybe that's what how he can insulate himself. But this is from Mother Jones. Rival crowdfunding site Patreon has been more welcoming than the far right. It now hosts Rubin, that's Davey Rubin, Cernovich, Southern, Baked Alaska, and a number of lesser-known figures such as alt-right sci-fi novelist and video blogger Brittany Pettigbone. Jesus. Yeah, I no need to mention all these idiots' names. Rubin had a meltdown, and he tweeted this. Oh, that was already up? Up? He said, I'll just read it. Hey, Josh Harkinson, your article is libelous about me. Expect a Republic attraction from you and Mother Jones. He also tweeted to Clara Jeffrey, Mother Jones' editor-in-chief, I expect a retraction and a correction on this libelous piece. The pundit also shared the definition of the term libel. And so basically his big answer is that he cannot possibly be a member of the far right because he supports legalizing pot and he's gay.
I'd like the textbook definition of classical liberal because this is the second time. This is the second time in I think 1 or 2 months, because Cassandra Fairbanks too was also upset that she got caught throwing up white power hand signs in the White House press briefing room.
Right.
That these free speech defenders who might describe themselves as classical liberals, very quick to take recourse to libel laws, which I thought free speech activists weren't super big fans of that. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like unless somebody is whining that they didn't get booked in college to do their brand new anti-transgender material, all of a sudden everything else seems to be very quickly put on the table, like accurately describing Dave Rubin's show. Now, to be fair, Dave Rubin might be genuinely stupid enough to not understand what his politics actually are. And I have a good example of this. Dave Rubin is so hackish and so unoriginal that he is also a practitioner of the oldest and laziest, and yes, sorry to say, Dave, far-right tactic imaginable, which is, hey, you remember that Martin Luther King Jr. guy? You know what he would be today if he was still alive? A conservative. Watch Dave Rubin make the case.
I think about this stuff. I really do. I
Pause it.
This is what I do for my life. So
I sort of believe that you think about this stuff, which is why you look so confused all the time. Go ahead.
I worry about what's happening in Western society, about whether our successes have led us to a place where we're just giving it up. Where young people think that socialism is cool, that this leftist nonsense is cool, that the oppression Olympics is cool, that suddenly segregating based on race is cool, that the ideas of Martin Luther King and JFK that were true liberals, the liberals that I believe in, that these ideas are becoming old school. Martin Luther King and JFK would most likely be conservatives by today's standards.
I'd like to read from JFK. This is after he accepted his Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo in 1964. He observed that the United States could, quote, learn from Scandinavian democratic socialism. He then talked about the need to confront the class issue, which is incredible because if you go back, Martin Luther King Jr. was now doubling up on two parts of the oppression Olympics. One, civil rights for black people, and then adding class to it. He also confided to his staff, and this is 1966, you can't talk about solving the economic problems of the Negro without talking about billions of dollars. You can't talk about ending the slums without first saying that profit must be taken out of the slums. You're really tempering and getting on dangerous ground because you're messing with folk then. You're messing with the captains of industry. Now, this means we're treading on difficult water because it really means that what you're saying is that there is something wrong with capitalism. There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America should move towards democratic socialism. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, at the end of his life was organizing on a class basis along with race and condemned imperialism in Vietnam. I am confident that Dave Rubin does not know any of this stuff and did not bother to look up any of those quotes.
Can I libel him a bit more? In addition to far right, I just want to reiterate the point that if you describe yourself as a free speech absolutist and don't understand the paradox of being quick to use libel laws, then you're a charlatan or a fraud.
And also a moron. I want to keep insulating us from this by really emphasizing that I totally believe that Dave Rubin is absolutely stupid enough to genuinely not know what he's talking about and think he was libeled. As my buddy Dick Coughlin said, it's the war of ideas. And in that war of ideas, Dave Rubin's Grenada. But I just do want to say, there is one good thing that's come out of David Rubin's work. And that is the birth of a new character. I really do worry about the fate of Western civilization. You know, when Anthony Cumia can't do good N-word material on Sirius XM, we know that we're giving in to Sharia. And we don't hate people. We're not racist. We just have a problem with bad ideas, which is why we think Muslims should be spied on and hit with drones. And now there's the oppression Olympics. People all of a sudden want to sit at a counter at Howard Johnson's, even when there's a perfectly good counter across the room. It's the oppression Olympics. Sad.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
Have you tried? By the way, Jerry Seinfeld, who's one of the great observational comics of our time, can't even go on college campuses and talk about gay French kings anymore because college campuses are so out of control. And you know, I think about this stuff. I worry about it.
I worry about Western civilization.
Who
talks like that?
Western civilization
How about
is in
read some about it,
the
then?
balance.
There's a whole...
Read what? Vala who? Who's Voltaire? I was just having dinner with Ann Coulter and listening to Milo make some incredibly funny jokes about having sex with men from Jamaica. I think I understand Western civilization. What an unbelievable, breathtaking fucking moron. And if you tweet at me, look, we've been saying for months, and people have been tweeting at Dave Rubin that either I or Sam will go on his show. I think he's savvy enough to know that he couldn't handle that. But if you tweet at me that I'm unfair and I'm misrepresenting his ideas, dude, just go your separate way. I no longer want to have an exchange of ideas with you. I really think in the balance. And you know, Jesus knew all sorts of Muslims. I really think that if Gandhi was alive today, he'd be campaigning for Carrie Johnson and contributing columns to Breitbart. Also, another thing that I'm sure that Dave Rubin has no idea about is that there are Dalits or untouchables in India. MLK was very influenced by Gandhi, which actually helped develop his strategies for nonviolent resistance. And he agreed, actually, that just as there was restitution and some provisions made for people that had been untouchable or Dalit class, that there even needed to be some things like maybe potentially affirmative action programs for African Americans. Sorry, hate to break it to you. This is an old joke, and it's been used for a lot of people, but I'll use it for Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is what people who hate white people think all white people are.